Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of Joseph's Fireside Chat series with me, Sam Flynn, COO and co-founder of Josef. My lights just went off. That's perfect timing. I'm joined today by Tommie Tavares-Ferreira, who is head of legalops at Cedar, at least for now, and we'll get into that in a minute, Tommie. Tommie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Tommie, first up, for people who don't know you, you've had a really compelling journey into the world of legal ops, and now you're operating right at the top, I would say. You have gone from receptionist through to contract manager at HBO, a number of other roles at Fortune 500 companies. I remember when we first met, you told me about that experience at HBO and kind of the light bulb moment for you about contracts. Can you tell us about that journey and that light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a long multi-year span, and what the light bulb moment is that you're referring to is the way that we partnered contracts with the database that we put all of the info in. So inside of the media, there are rights management databases where you take all of your deals and you put them in, and then you can understand like who has licensing rights to certain films. We specifically were distributing that HBO programming out to distributors in other countries besides the US. So one of the most important elements of the contract was actually what was inside of it and what you could sell to other people. And so that was, I think, I didn't realize it at the time, the first introduction to technology that would power what you do with a contract. And so in that context, it really was like going out, making a deal, selling, Game of Thrones in Switzerland, but perhaps more important than that action was knowing where it was sold and then when you can sell it. And so it really was taking all the data out of it, putting it into a rights management system. And it was my introduction to what would later become my passion about legal tech.
I love that. So was part of that light bulb moment for you realizing how the data contained in the contracts related to the core business of HBO?
Absolutely. Like every business runs on what is inside of their contracts. There's such a large volume of information that hides there. And so, one of the game changers is how you can extrapolate out the details of what really is powering your business. And a lot of businesses know this, and a lot of businesses don't. It's hidden inside their contracts.
I think it's a great place to start our conversation today. Um, Carrying on with that theme, you stayed really close to contracts and documents throughout your career, right? I feel like that's been a really big theme in
Huge,
your
huge.
role in legal ops and your expertise that you've developed. Can you share with people who are maybe less familiar with that space? How are the ways that companies often don't think correctly or mishandle contracts and documents in this space?
Well, contract specifically is an area of expertise for me, right? Like I've started that journey there where we just talked about with HBO. Maybe slightly before that was doing music licensing and sending out music licensing contracts, but later on, the my experience at Rakuten was my first introduction into actually doing a CLM implementation, and I went on to do 4 of them later. And for anyone in your audience who may not know, CLM stands for Contract Lifecycle Management, and it's really the connectivity of the contract as it cycles through all of your sort of approvals and workflows and ultimately ends up in this repository where you can extrapolate information out of it. But the friction point of going to market or making revenue faster, and one which allows people to tell the story about a legal team where they're stopping, sort of like revenue to be made. Like that was not a story I bought into, and one which I immediately wanted to eradicate. And so my first role at Rakuten was understanding the journey of how salespeople went to market, where their friction points were, and how we unlock their ability to make more revenue. And of course, that had to do with contracting. And so that was my, sort of my second introduction of how do I use systems to power these people to go out and make revenue faster. And that came in me and a Salesforce engineer becoming really close friends, me understanding like how does the sales team go to market? What do they use? What are the mechanisms? Where are they getting stuck? And then literally just unlocking all of that by understanding their journey, and then actually building purpose fit systems to do that. But it all started with like, cozying up with an engineer in Salesforce and figuring out like how they do their work, and then overlaying it with how we can all do it better as partners.
Cool. Such a good insight. And do you know what I heard in that entire answer?
What?
Very few references to legal lawyers
Yeah.
at all, right? All, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but like
I
so much.
mentioned an engineer,
You
right?
mentioned an
I mentioned
engineer, you
engineer.
mentioned working with sales, learning what their pain points were, unblocking them, Salesforce. Like very little of that was focused on legal.
And here's what I will say as the person who was the legal representative. Like what I was not going to allow was any of those folks thinking that my team was a blocker, right? Like
Mm.
there's this unfortunate reputation of legal teams being like a team of no or blocking business. But I've done so much analysis on this, and especially in the revenue generating side of contracting. The reality is it's often not a legal team. It is actually just that the entire deal life cycle takes a long time, but legal teams never had the ability to sort of capture where they were moving or where someone else was moving and blocking. And often in like a deal life cycle, for example, it's the counterparty who has a contract for a really long time. But if you don't have the data to show your sales team, like it's not me, it's like it's your counterpart, like they're holding it. So really, because I was so interested in reputation and like sort of designing like a legal team that was seen as modern and forward thinking and one that was partners with our business, I was all about eradicating these falsehoods and ensuring people understood like that we were deep partners, and we were actually the ones empowering the business.
Amazing. That perfectly prefigures my next question.
Nice.
Not by design.
No, not at all.
Because what I'm hearing there is so much of the CLM implementation and your work around it allowed you to tell a story,
Yes.
a different story to the one that lawyers often tell themselves and that the business often tells
Right.
themselves about lawyers, right? You were rewriting the story.
That's right.
I feel like so for people who don't know you, right? You in the legal ops community, you're such a powerful storyteller, whether through your podcast with Tom Stevenson, whether through your writing, whether through your thought leadership. Why does that matter to you? And how do you think storytelling matters to legal when we're looking at these kinds of issues?
So for me personally, storytelling is probably one of the most powerful tools. And it wasn't something that I came into until later in my career of connecting these two dots. But early in my life, and I won't even say career, it was life. It was literally college, undergrad. Um, I thought that storytelling was actually the journey I was going to take. So for my senior thesis, I did a documentary on the karaoke subculture. I wrote it, I filmed it, I produced it, I edited it. I literally did all of it. Like I was
Wait, on
very
on the what subculture?
karaoke.
Karaoke subculture.
So
Okay,
like,
amazing.
why are people into it? Do they think they're going to become famous? How did karaoke come from Japan to the United States? What did that look like? But like I would go to bars and film, and there would be like people who really truly thought that this was their gateway to becoming famous. And it was such an interesting insight to understand. And I call it a subculture because it is a group of people who are an entire community around this one common theme. And then they run the gamut from people who are delusional and actually think that this might be how they find fame, and then there are those that this is the way that they entertain themselves and let off steam on a weekend. And so following these people's stories was really like very insightful and impactful and frankly entertaining. but it was my passion with storytelling. However, this was, I think, around right before sort of the 2009 recession when I left school. So I was also slightly young. Even though I was ambitious, I was also insecure and thought that might be a very hard field to go into right now with like real estate collapsing, et cetera. So I opted to find a sort of quote unquote more stable like journey. And I did some work in music licensing and was on the business side of the entertainment industry. And my journey started with thinking I would go into the entertainment industry in a different way. But then I thought there was more stability on the business side of it. And so that was the bridge between why the beginning of my career was in the entertainment industry. Really, I've always loved storytelling. And so fast forward several years, I've self-published several books, and like I've always kept storytelling close to my heart because it's a personal interest. And then I'd probably say about 5 to 10 years ago, maybe in the beginnings of my legal operations career, I began to realize the connection between the influence of storytelling and getting business done. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you're going to, say, a CFO and you're asking for money to put in legal tech, or when you're going to a sales team and asking them to change your behavior, it's not the ask that's important. It's how you tell the story to get them on board with what you want. And so I found it to be one of the most powerful tools in, activating people and influencing them and getting them to go on a journey with me, where behavioral psychology is such a powerful tool in business transformation, right? And in the story that you tell, you can either get people to come on board or absolutely not. And so one of those journeys wins and one doesn't. And so I found that if I could lean into storytelling, it often got people to go on a journey with me that they may not have otherwise done if I hadn't told them a good story for them to buy into.
Mm. And you dropped a term there, behavioral economics, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behavioral psychology, like Adam Grant studies,
Wonderful.
like, right?
What like if you were to give someone like one nugget of wisdom, what's one like tactic or trick they could use in their stories to make them more compelling?
So I think there's two really fun things that I do. One is figuring out what is in it for someone else, right? Like, especially if you would like someone to either change their behavior or change their mind. Like, people don't want you to sort of talk at them, but if you can figure out the angle or the hook that actually someone is passionate about or that would motivate them to change their behavior, right? Like, and so if I liken that to legal ops or contract management, like one of the most compelling stories I can tell with a salesperson on why they'd change their behavior or adopt technology is they can bring in revenue faster. And not only just telling them, but actually having them design a process with me or having them go on that journey with me to say, your motivation is revenue faster. Mine is to build the way that you do that. How do we partner to do that? So that's one compelling way that I found people to change their
Mm.
behavior. Another, and this isn't behavioral change, but this is around choice and change, is and this is really a hack I use with my child, so I hope it doesn't sound pedantic, but it works with adults too. Um, you're giving someone two choices, so they feel empowered to make a choice, but you give them two choices, so you control two choices. Like, if I ask my son, do you want an apple or do you want broccoli? Either of those are healthy choices. I'm not saying, do you want a cookie or do you want an apple? He
Mm-hmm.
felt empowered that he got to choose, that he wanted the apple, but really I was controlling that he made a healthy choice.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he could say no to either, but what people want is autonomy. They want to feel in control. And so the more that you can, if you're likening that to, like, a tech stack story, like, do you want tech A or tech B? And if you choose what both of those are with your team of lawyers, maybe they will pick A or B rather than saying I don't want tech. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is also another, I think, way to bring people on a journey with you.
I love that. The answer could be we don't want tech, or it could be, oh, my cousin told me about this amazing platform, that you've never heard of, or whatever. I think you said that people want autonomy, right?
Yeah,
People always say they want autonomy, they want control. What they don't want is chaos.
right.
And I think if you're coming in as the subject matter expert, approach it as that, and then give them options that you know are going to work and that you know are good for them. I
Yes.
really like that. One other reflection because I want to move on. I could talk to you all day, but I know you're very busy and important. But one other reflection on what you just said, which I think people so often forget about storytelling, is so much of good storytelling is listening.
Yeah.
The hook. You have to find the hook, right? And in order to find the hook, you have to be an extraordinary listener,
Yeah.
or build the story with them, right?
Yeah.
Like, what was that? Was it Exquisite Corpse? Have you heard that game? Where you do sentence, everyone in a room writes one sentence, and then they write the next sentence, and then they write the next sentence, and it sort of flows on in that way. It's like creating the story together.
Right.
Beautiful. Love it. Um, at Josef, a big part of what we do, for anyone who doesn't know us, we're an automation platform. In-house legal teams primarily build self-service tools on our platform. So letting the business generate the contract themselves, or answer their own question, or trigger some kind of action or workflow. A big part of my belief and our belief in why we created a self-service platform is a lot of what lawyers do can be automated, should be automated, and by doing so, you can unblock the business, right? You can help the sales team generate more revenue, or can let the marketing team get their next campaign out faster. What is your experience with self-service, and what are some of your ideas around how you can be successful in that space?
I was about to say to you, like, Sam, can we go off the record so I can ask you a question? But you asked me, so I'll ask it, and then you decide if you're cutting it out.
Okay, great.
But the interesting psychology piece of telling lawyers, and I presume you sell the product to lawyers, is the value prop of self-service. And I'd be so curious to know where the roadblock is of them hearing that is something that maybe comes dangerously close to replacing them, right? And I mean it. Feel free to cut all of this out to your
No,
heart's content.
I lean fully into this conversation.
And
I love
so I ask because I found that to be even in things that are not as savvy as maybe like self-service and AI auto responses, but something like even when I've met lawyers at the point where you're just even talking about CLMs and going, we're going to templatize something. And I'm like, well, I don't know if you can make a template. I don't know if it actually can cover every single,
it.
I don't know if you can make a playbook. I don't know if it can actually cover every fallback position. I've always encountered resistance. And so, of course, I've used some of these tools like storytelling, like influencing, like the what's in it for you, these skills were all flexed out of finding resistance and meeting resistance. And I only learned these skills because I met such resistance along the journey. So I'd actually, not to turn this interview on you, but I'd be so curious to know, what do you do when you encounter that resistance of something that sounds like it's replacing me, or what do I do then? Like, what does that journey look like?
Yeah. Interviewing me, why not? This is
When
gonna
I
be
can't help
great.
it. I can't help it.
I mean, ask a founder a question. It could
Right.
wax lyrical for hours. No, it's a great question, and something that I have grappled with from day one of Josef back in 2018 at Stanford, coming up with this idea for what I wanted this company to look like. The way that I grapple with that question and get lawyers comfortable with that idea, because it's very uncomfortable for a lot of lawyers, right? Is yes, tell the story about the benefit, right? So, general counsel, health tech company, sort of in a similar space to Cedar, launching service agreement tools in a matter of months, and then telling me, I haven't seen a services agreement in 6 months. I haven't seen one. And he used to see several a week when they were like, got a little bit complicated, right? That idea, that benefit is very powerful, and it's much more powerful than you'll be able to complete this contract 10% faster, 20% faster with a little assistant on the side. That is not going to get you all the way there, but it's going to get you some of the way there. For the people who are more trepidatious, all they are looking for is control.
Right.
And so with like our Q&A module, right? AI powered. Ask whatever question you want, and the tool's going to answer. That as a concept scares the hell out of a lot of lawyers, because they're like, what? But what if it says this, and what if it says that, and what about this?
That's right.
Right? But and that, just to take your position from before with the sales team, I sit down with the lawyers and I say, what do you need? What do you want? Right. And it's not that they don't want the tool, it's that they want to be able to see what it's saying.
Yeah.
They want to know if it's uncertain. They want an escalation pathway. They want to be able to change it and tweak it. They want to be able to dive in and interrupt something if it's happening, like escalation pathways, triggers, workflows. So we build our tools to make sure that the subject matter experts remain in control, but they still get that benefit. The final thing I will say, and this is maybe more philosophical, is I strongly believe that we build better legal and compliance technology when lawyers and compliance officers are in the driver's seat.
100%.
And that is how I bridge that divide.
Yep.
Doesn't always work, but that's how I do it. What do you think?
I'm aligned with you completely. I think if you told me that you build something and you don't have legal professionals, compliance professionals that either are design partners in the loop or are somehow giving you feedback, I would say I'm not so sure that that I see where there's going to be success, because I think that there is such value. And here's a great example, one that I always use and I come across often. I've worked with a ton of engineers throughout my career. They've shockingly, people may not realize, like, they have been my partners more than probably anyone, because I have such a tech bend and I've done so much work in tech. My partners have been engineers. They've been the people who bring what we're trying to achieve to life. But my stakeholders have always been the legal professionals, the compliance professionals, for two reasons. One, I'm not a lawyer. And so there are considerations that they will have that I won't. Like, for example, in building an intake system, the lawyers weighing in on the reality that certain queries, maybe about a dispute or a claim that came in, would need a path that would ultimately protect privilege should something go to litigation. That was absolutely not the first thought that I would ever have, right? Like, that's not also going to be an engineer's first thought. I bet their first thought is, how do you nearly automate something, completely autonomous workflows, right? So, and I think that also lends to diversity of thought generally. When you have a bunch of people in the room who are coming from a different perspective, you're always going to build the best thing, because not being in an echo chamber and hearing things that you just don't know, is always going to sort of further benefit it. And so if you take that and apply it to technology, having, any tech launch I've done has a bunch of different stakeholders. 90% of them belong there. 1% of them is, I'm pulling someone who literally has nothing to do with it to go, what do you think of this? And just getting an opinion of someone who, sometimes the person who has nothing to do with your project will ask you one of the best questions, and none of you will have thought, like, that's it. That's an absolutely great question. Like, so what I'm trying to say is, have as many people as you can poking holes into what you're doing, so that you get, you sort of get covered off on as many corners, those that you have experts in, and then those who maybe just ask like a really silly, funny question that is one of the best questions you get. And in building something, lawyers, I think if that's their domain expertise, they're some of the best people to have helping you build.
Yeah. I think that is a great counterpoint to my position on we need lawyers and compliance professionals involved. You also need the flip side. Um,
And those
we
can be ops people, right? Many of them are not trained lawyers. And so
Mhm.
they think differently about risk. You know, I am quite the risk taker, right? I was not trained and didn't go to school and didn't learn how to not take risks, right? Like so, that's why I think that relationship is also really special too between legal ops and lawyers because
Push them.
you were trained one way. I wasn't trained in that regard, and there's a push pull relationship there where we get to play off of each other and provoke one another in a way that like I think I've seen has one of the best outcomes.
Hmm. I think that's right. My friend accused me of having a hot take when I said this the other day, but I think lawyers are actually trained to exaggerate risk, right? Like when I was at law school,
Don't
I'm going to
disagree.
be told this comma. I remember like a comma was misplaced, and then the partner, this is sorry, post law school when I was being trained,
Right.
said told me about this case where $100 million case hinged on the placement of a comma.
Right.
And so then in my head, I was like, well, every comma could be worth $100
Oh
million,
God. Could you
right? Like,
imagine the $100 million comma?
right? But that partner forgot to tell me that the chances of that comma resulting in that are almost non-existent. And so
Exactly.
that is our job on the tech and ops side to like
To talk through what is the chance of this actually happening.
correct,
I
correct.
when I built a self-service NDA mechanism because at the time we got something like several hundred NDAs a month, and it was just a volume that was kind of insane. And a
Hmm.
lot of lawyers are spending a lot of times on NDAs. And I said, why can't we not only put like a self-service NDA together, sales team can go grab it, we'll give them a URL. But I went one step even further to make everyone really uncomfortable because I'm good at that and said, and also, can we have the CEO pre-sign the NDA? And so literally it's
Oh,
just the other party signing it. So we
uh-huh.
tell them no red lines, no changes. Like we don't even need it running through our system for signature. And people really lost their minds in figuring out what was wrong, what could go wrong, what what risk I was bringing upon the organization. And so I said, I'm just curious, how many times have we been sued over an NDA? I just want to know the number. I'm just curious. And that number being zero,
Mhm.
and probably zero likeliness of actually future disputes, helped sort of start the conversation
Great.
around like, is this actually a risk, or is this something that we're taught in law school is the $100 million comma? And so I think taking those people who are more risk averse and less risk averse and having them have those conversations helps you to move faster in business. So the conclusion of that story is we absolutely had the pre-signed NDA help people go to market much faster. And we went from literally seeing hundreds of NDAs a month to like probably 10.
Cool. I love the end of that story, of course,
Yeah.
because that's what I do every day, and that is like gold. That is music to my ears. But the golden part of that, I think, is that helping the team engage in that paradigm shift
Yeah.
just through a simple question. It's beautiful. I love that. Um, I'm conscious of not keeping you for too much longer, but I want to ask you two more questions.
Sam, ask away.
Um, AI.
Yeah.
Have you heard of
No, I'm sorry, what's that? What's AI?
it? AI and contracts. I'm going to ask the contracts guru.
Yeah.
What what have you seen that excites you, and where do you think we're going next?
I saw something that excited me. I won't mention the platform. I'll just say that the technology it delivered was the AI genie, when you pressed a button, would give you a quick summary of the red lines and tell you
Mhm.
sort of what it meant. And it would
Nice.
say, if you press the button, it would say, here's what was changed via this most recent red line, and here's what it shifted. And some of it would give you summations that were like, the risk is a little bit higher now because you've changed the indemnification, and give like, it was an Eli 5, explain it like I'm 5, or a contract sort of redlining for dummies. What I think is fascinating is that was super, that would expedite someone's time for redline, but I'm a former contract manager, someone who negotiated contracts for a lot of my career. And I think this is something that I'm going to touch on that actually impacts all industries. This is not just legal. What I'm curious to know is, what does that do to someone who's early in their career?
Yes.
And that's the big elephant in the room around all of AI. Like, we're having that question around junior lawyer associates becoming partners, and how much of it is all of that work you didn't want to do early in your career. Are we eradicating the pipeline to expertise, I think, is my question around AI. Or is all of that stuff that you do earlier not leading to you becoming an expert? And so that would be my question around what it does for those who are earlier in their career, or who are learning, or who are not yet experts. Like, what is the AI benefiting or like taking away from their experience?
Yeah.
And how do they supplement that?
I think that's kind of the $1,000,000 question right now.
Yeah, we have to watch it play out. And also maybe like the abacus being replaced by, paper and pen being replaced by a calculator didn't mean there weren't accountants. It just meant they had different tools to do their work. Like, when Excel came out, I am certain there were accountants losing their mind about whether or not they were going to be replaced. And the reality is they just learned how to use those tools in really good ways. They weren't replaced by them, they supplemented them. So I presume maybe the story plays out like that. Like knowledge workers are supplemented by this, not replaced by it. But I do want to know how you become an expert if some of that early work is done for you.
Yeah. I agree fully. I think that. Do you ever listen to Ezra Klein, his podcast, New York Times?
No.
No. Anyway, I think he's a New York Times like commentator or something.
Yeah.
And he has a podcast. And
Should I have said yes? Should I have said yes?
You should.
I should have. Okay.
His latest episode was on education and AI.
Yep.
And he has on this education expert who did a very comprehensive research study into the impact of AI on students already. And it's extraordinary for anyone thinking about how this is impacting kids and college students. The thing that came out of it, the thesis that came out of it was, it can have an extraordinary impact, but we have to design it for the kids. We can't just give them ChatGPT and say, go nuts.
Yep.
Because right now what they're doing is gaming everything. And like, if you think the kids haven't figured it out, like,
they
you
have.
need to watch what the kids are doing.
That's
they're
right.
running it through, they run their essays through ChatGPT, and then they run it through Gemini, and then they run it through Claude, and then they run it through 2 AI fraud checkers, and then they will repeat that process until they get something. They'll then run it through a system called, it like introduces human errors to make it look like they did it again. Like they've just got it all figured out, right? And I think we also have to think about that for our juniors and the people coming up. What did you call it? You had a beautiful way of putting it. The like expert pipeline.
Yeah, a pipeline to becoming an expert on something.
There you go. And so I think we have to think about that. One of the other people in this fireside chat series who I've been speaking to is Megan Ma, Dr. Megan Ma from Codex. And right now her central research is on the idea of what she calls a legal persona.
Yeah.
And I'm going to explain this terribly, so go and listen to the episode. But
I will.
It's about the idea of capturing a partner's, this is in a law firm context, like expertise, right? How they would amend the contract, how they would answer this question, how they would draft this advice. And then the junior actually gets to interact with that like digital twin, that legal persona via an AI interface. They still get time with the partner, but actually they get a lot more time with this version of the partner that can actually go through and review the amendments they've made to the contract. So I think while we don't know what it looks like yet, I have a lot of hope for where we might go on that point.
As long as we don't lose or don't sort of like put ourselves in a path of eradicating critical thinking
Yes.
and creativity,
Yes.
I think I'm fully bought in. And I read something interesting about certain industries, like for example, dance, art, right? Like there, and then there's a different quadrant for art because obviously, like certain AI can generate images and things like that, but certain art that you need to be physically present, like being a dancer, being a basketball player, like there's so many mediums of entertainment and art that are not going to be enjoyable. Like I don't quite think I would enjoy a basketball game of a bunch of robots, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's something about the grit and seeing a human sweat, the passion that I don't think like anyone is interested in seeing AI replace. I think creativity is the element that we all can bring to something that is not necessarily like really very well replicated right now. So I feel like creative spaces especially, or even creative thinking in business, like those feel really like safe for the moment. And I hope that they stay safe.
I agree, and I think they will. Um, Tommie, you've prefigured my last question, I think, which is, what's one question we should be asking ourselves about AI that we're not? Is that your answer, or do you have another one?
I like that as an answer, frankly. And I would just simply ask, like, what is your motivation for when you use it? And so, like, a lot of my motivation is eradicate some of what is not my human personal touch, right? Like, even a day like today, like if you were to put into the machine, like generate these questions for Tommie and like, and then I go in and can say, can you respond to these questions in my voice to give me a jumping off point? But really, like what I don't want to lose is what I overlay that the machine doesn't know. It doesn't know all of the stories I told you about my career experience, but it might be able to give you a jumping off point for questions or me a jumping off point for answers. But really, what is more organic inside of all of that, it's
Mm-hmm.
our connection, it's that we know each other, it's the chemistry, like all of that can't be replicated. And so I would just ask you, like, to ask, like, what are you using it for? Like, there's a very good value prop to these tools, and like utilizing it for what is actually sort of like helping you to open up your day in a way strategically, I think is the best way to do it. But honestly, like the creativity that you offer cannot yet be replicated.
Not at all. I think that's a correct and beautiful point to end on, right? Like the delta between great and good is now not all those things that AI can
Right.
do. The delta between great and good, or how you're going to stand out, is the creativity piece.
That's right.
I love that. Um, I know I said I had one last question, but we haven't talked about your upcoming role at LawTrades. Tell us, what are you doing next?
So my career has evolved in a really interesting way. So formerly, I've spent over a decade doing legal operations. My most recent role of heading up legal operations at Cedar has culminated in me taking a role that is actually not legal operations. So I'm joining LawTrades as their chief strategy officer, and for those who are not familiar, LawTrades is on-demand legal talent. It offers a platform for those who are searching for talent and those who are talent. But so much more than that is the story that I hope to tell about legal operations really being a strategic role. And I think that that was evident in my last few roles, like the strategy that I brought, and how I think in my conversation in meeting the founders of LawTrades and getting to know them and understanding what their business is and where they hope to go, and how legal operations and technology plays a huge role in what they're doing, and overlaying my expertise in storytelling and strategy, some operational efficiencies, sure, building community. All of that really came together in the conversations we were having. I just got to know them and we had such great vibes together, and we ideated on some great ideas, and we knew like this is the next step for the company, this is the next step for me. And so I'm super pumped about this next stage in my career.
Yay, I am too. Who better to lead, to guide these founders in law trades through this industry than you, Tommie? They're very lucky. With that, I'm going to say thank you.
Thank you.
As always, such a pleasure talking to
I
you.
know.
We'll see you and the lights have gone off to signal the end of this fireside chat. We'll see you at Ladies' Lunch with Tom Stevenson and Jen
Yes,
McCann somewhere in New York.
I can't wait for us to have another lunch.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tommie.
Thank you for having me. And this was great. I love it. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you, Sam.